I urge you, brothers and sisters, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, as spiritual worship. There's this nasty and pernicious heresy that has been around since the first century of Christianity. It has taken on many forms and many faces, always looking slightly different with a new twist, but at the core it's always the same. Its formal name for this heresy is Gnosticism, coming from the Greek word gnosko, meaning to know things. Essentially, Gnostics are those who see the spiritual life as warfare between not heaven and earth or heaven and Satan, but between our spirits and our bodies. And we hear some of these references in Paul where he talks about like the desires of the flesh. And taking these ideas from Paul, they ran with it and said the body is bad, that this mortal physical body is what keeps us from being holy. They believe that only real advancement in the spiritual life is to gain knowledge about God, sometimes secret knowledge that you have to be so far in the church to really know and to learn more about the divine. That way they can reject this body and just live in this mental, spiritual realm. This kind of secret knowledge may sound like foolishness, but I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me asking, "Priest, what is the secret to being holy?" The answer is live a life of prayer and virtue in accordance with the teachings of Jesus Christ. But that's no secret. Many hear this and find it unsatisfactory because it's difficult, and they want a shortcut, an easy answer. But to quote G.K. Chesterton, Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and not tried. Or still more, people approach me talking about their prayer lives as though it were some sort of mental exercise you do in the morning to prepare yourself for the day, or that when you're stressed, you do it in order to recenter yourself, to calm our minds, that we can then approach life's struggles calm, cool, and collected. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. Maintaining interior peace is important for a healthy spiritual life. But if the focus of our prayer is to center, our prayer is not to God, but to ourselves. And I don't know about you, I can't answer prayers, not like God can. Or still more, people go to extreme lengths of fasting and penances. This is less common today, but the idea is that if our bodies are inhibiting our spirit from ascending, then we ought to weaken our body so that our spirit has greater freedom to move. This is false. Our bodies are not the enemy of the spirit, they are one. We are not ghosts trapped in some sort of fleshy machine. Humans are body and soul united as one. If I punch you in your arm, would you say, "I punched you"? Or would you say, "I punched the arm that you operate or possess"? You could rightly say, "I punched your arm," but most would say, "I punched you." We intuitively identify our bodies with ourselves because we are one. And the consequences of this unity of body and soul are numerous. But for our purposes today, I'd like to focus on the effects that the soul has on the body and the body on the soul. The Latin word for soul is anima, which is where we get the word animate. The soul animates our body, and when our soul becomes separated from our bodies die and are no longer animated. The soul can grow and change like at baptism. The original sin that stains our soul is washed away, and an indelible, irremovable mark is placed on our souls, designating us, consecrating us to God. These changes in our souls typically aren't seen physically, but that makes them no less real. For there is more to reality than just physical reality. Sure, many spiritual realities can be communicated in and through physical ones, like the sacraments. But that doesn't reduce spirituality to merely the physical. But the body, the physical, also affects the soul. The spiritual, it's not just a one-way street of our soul animating our body. Our body affects our soul. And I think we've all experienced that, whether we recognize it or not. When we're physically lazy and inactive, our spiritual drive also becomes lethargic. When we're gluttonous, our souls become heavy and weighed down, unwilling to move towards God. Even if our spirits desire the good, the habits and desires of our body seem to override our good will. It is for this reason that Paul spoke about the need to take on the desires of the flesh, and why the Gnostics claim that the body is bad, because it inhibits our spirit. But what the Gnostics can't see is that the body also can enhance and enable our spirits into new heights. We know this because the second person of the Trinity took onto himself humanity, walking, eating, living among us. Jesus in his incarnation shows us that God, and thusly our spiritual lives and our relationship with him, is both body and soul. If God wanted to, he could have just given us that secret knowledge, that non-physical understanding that would spare our soul. But we see that God, in his infinite wisdom, didn't do that. No, he had something different he desired for humanity. He wanted us to turn to him with our whole selves, body and soul, baptized in water, receiving him physically in the Eucharist. We can't just be for God with our soul. We must be for God with the whole of who we are, because God is a jealous God, and he is unwilling to share us with anything else. Thus, it is not negligible to ignore our physicality when worshiping God with our whole selves. And the church in her wisdom asks certain things of us, especially during Mass, to facilitate the offering of ourselves, body and soul. Some refer to this as Catholic calisthenics. And I'd like to just list a couple. When we stand as a sign of respect and honor and attentiveness. We're not relaxed, but we are focused. Standing is a sign that we have died with Christ and are now risen with him, a new creation in splendor. We stand together as the church, ready for action, ready to receive our orders that we can go out. For centuries, everyone stood during the whole time of Mass. There wasn't room in the church for people to be kneeling. There weren't pews for people to sit in. Standing was all we had. We also kneel as a sign of penance, adoration, and homage. We lower ourselves before something that is greater than us. That's why during the Eucharistic prayer, when Christ comes to the Mass fully in the Eucharist, we're on our knees, adoring and worshiping him. Recently, sitting has become a phenomenon in the church with the introduction of pews in the Protestant Reformation. The posture that we have when we're sitting is one of receptive listening and meditating on the readings and when the priest is preparing the altar. Our hands, what do we do with our hands? There's one of my favorite quotes from Talladega Nights is Ricky Bobby I don't know what to do with my hands. It's so true. When we're praying, what do? Do we have our hands in our pockets like we're uninterested? Our arms crossed, defensive, unwilling to listen? I'd argue that the best positions we could be is with our hands united together. Now, the Eastern religions are all about like centering yourself, and this unites your chakras. That's not what we're doing here. But by bringing our hands together, we are offering to the Lord ourselves and our souls. We are focusing ourselves. So if you stand like this, that's fine. If you stand like this, that's fine. If you stand like this, that's fine. But having your hands right here in front of you, offering ourselves, that's where we're supposed to be. I know for myself in seminary, I knew I was going to be standing like this a lot as the priest. You see our altar servers are also standing like this. But even when I was in the pews, I started holding my hands like this, right thumb over left, just to train myself to keep my hands like this. And now I find it hard to pray in Mass without my hands like this. I get distracted. I feel around what's in my pocket. I'm shoving my sister. No, hands together. You may have also noticed that when I'm praying the Mass, that my fingers will sometimes be like this. These are called my canonical digits. They are what hold Jesus. At the moment of consecration, I am holding Jesus with these fingers. They're reserved for him. You'll notice as I move around the altar, I don't use these fingers anymore. I use these fingers to control and do things, because these fingers are now reserved for Christ. Practically, I'm also keeping the little bits of the host from falling all over the place by keeping my hands together. But more directly, I have reserved these fingers for Christ and Christ alone in this moment. They're to be used for nothing else. And really, that's a small way that I am giving myself to Christ. You'll also see the priest praying in a hand position like this. This is called the orans, which is just Latin for prayer. It's a position of prayer, and the priest does it in the Mass because he is praying the Mass, and you, all the people of God, are united with him. But this is a priestly position in the Mass. The people are to be praying, but not like this. The church doesn't ask you to. The church tells the deacon directly, do not, because this is a priestly position during the Mass. Another thing that we all can do together is bowing. There are several times throughout the Mass that we're pretty emphatic about us bowing. At the mention of the Incarnation during the Creed, that's mainly one of them. Also, when there's a blessing at the end of Mass, we also bow. But there's actually 5 times that you'll notice my head dips all throughout the Mass. At the moment when we mention the Incarnation, whether in the Creed or anywhere else really, I do a little head bow. At the name of Jesus, I do a little head bow. At the naming of the full Trinity, of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, a head bow. At the name of our most blessed Mother, Mary, head bow. If it's a saint's patron, or if it's a saint's feast day, head bow at the name of that saint. And another time that we can bow our heads in reverence, in deference, letting God be in charge, lowering ourselves, presenting our neck in a sign of submission, is right before we receive Jesus. As we're getting in our lines and processing forward, hands together, focused on what we're about to receive. And before we receive, as the person before us is receiving, we bow or even genuflect as a sign of reverence for what we are approaching, our hands together. But then as we approach, you have the choice. You can either create a throne in your hand with the shape of a cross to receive him and then consume him. I'm preferable to receiving on the tongue, which isn't exactly an option right now during COVID, not as much at least. But I had a beautiful vision once when I was in Germany of all these Germans receiving the Eucharist on the tongue, and they do things different in Germany, and they just kind of crowded at the foot of the altar and all just kind of stood there with their mouths open waiting to receive. And it was like Mama Bird feeding all her babies, and it was wonderful. But there's reverence to the Eucharist and saying, I'm not worthy, I'm lowering myself. We used to require everyone to kneel when they receive, because this is God, and our bodies should reflect that. And all these things are just in the Mass. When praying on our own, we should light a candle, we should kneel down. If we can, we should face east towards the rising sun, where Christ is said to rise on the last day. Even if you're not facing east, orienting ourselves in this mindset of I am facing towards God. Put up a crucifix to help visualize that, yes, God stands before me, because we are not just spiritual beings. We are physical and spiritual beings. We are body and soul. And we need these physical realities to help align our whole selves towards God.